So today, we're going to dive into a new kind of intelligence tool, one that's built for a world where, let's be honest, making the right call has never been more difficult or more critical. We're talking about Investigator AI, and its whole promise is to help you see what really matters way before it becomes a problem. Okay, let's just start right here, because this quote, it absolutely nails the problem we're all facing. We're trying to operate in a world where trust, the very thing that makes business and relationships work, it just feels like it's vanishing. And that creates a whole new level of risk we've never seen before. The real issue, when you boil it all down, is that it's getting harder and harder to know who you're really dealing with. The landscape of deception out there has gotten so sophisticated, it's like trying to navigate a modern maze in the dark. And we're not just talking about your typical old-school scams anymore. Nope. We're up against brand new kinds of threats. Take synthetic identities, for example. These are completely fabricated people, stitched together from bits and pieces of real and fake data, all designed for one purpose, to fool our systems and commit fraud. And it gets even more wild. Imagine you get a video call, it's your CEO, they look and sound exactly like them, and they're telling you to authorize a massive wire transfer, right now. Only, it wasn't them. It was a deep fake. This stuff isn't science fiction anymore, it's happening right now. The risk isn't just digital either. A lot of it is hidden in plain sight, buried inside these ridiculously complex webs of shell companies and offshore legal structures. They're built from the ground up to do one thing: obscure the truth and hide who's really pulling the strings. So if the threats have changed this much, what about our defenses? Well, here's the tough reality. The old ways of doing things, the traditional due diligence, all those manual checks, they just can't keep up. They're broken. And this slide right here really shows you the fundamental mismatch. Our old tools were static, manual. They gave you a single snapshot in time. But the risk we face today, it's dynamic, it's networked, it's always changing. It's like trying to photograph a flock of birds with an old-timey camera that takes 10 minutes to capture one shot. You're just gonna miss the real story every single time. So if the old way is totally broken, what's the new solution? Well, this brings us to the main event, Investigator AI. It's not designed to be just another tool. The idea here is that it's a new kind of detective, built for this incredibly complex world. Now, this is a really key distinction. They don't call Investigator AI an app or a platform. They call it a trust infrastructure. It's specifically designed for those high-stakes moments. The decisions where you absolutely, positively cannot afford to be wrong. It completely changes the game from a one-off manual check to a living, breathing computational process. And this quote just brilliantly sums up the difference. A search engine? It gives you a list of links. It gives you data. But Investigator AI is designed to give you intelligence. It's about understanding the connections, seeing the patterns, and getting the real story the data is telling. And it does it continuously. It's always in motion. So what's the big promise here? It's simple. Insight without noise. Look, we are all drowning in information these days, right? The real value isn't more data. It's clarity. The whole goal is to cut through that flood of junk to find the few signals that actually matter. So how on earth does it actually deliver on this promise? Well, it's not magic. It's a very specific approach built around this core concept they call the living graph. Think of it like a dynamic, constantly updating map of relationships that's always working to connect those hidden dots. The whole system really breaks this huge task down into 3 core pillars. First up, identity and entity resolution. That's all about figuring out who you're really dealing with, even when they're trying to hide. Second, there's relationship intelligence, which is about mapping that hidden network of partners and associates, because that's where the risk usually lives. And third, continuous risk reassessment. It treats every profile like a living thing that can and will change over time. I love this table because it translates all the tech into something we can all understand, the different roles on a modern investigative team. So you've got the deep search module, which is kind of like the researcher on the team who reads literally everything. Then the relationship graph is your classic detective connecting all the dots on a giant wall. The fraud simulator, that's your strategist, wargaming all the potential moves. And finally, you've got the risk engine, the analyst who doesn't just give you a score, but actually explains why something is a risk. Okay, this is really important. For any tool that's designed to measure trust, you have to understand its limits. The folks who built this are super clear. This is not a surveillance platform. It's not a law enforcement system. It's an assistive intelligence tool. It's there to provide context and insight, but the final call, that always stays with a human. Now, Investigator AI is clearly powerful all by itself, but it was actually designed from day one to be one piece of a much larger puzzle. It's part of this idea they call one brain, many tools. So that central brain is this thing called OS3-, which is basically an operating system for intelligence. And then you have all these other specialized tools, like Shield AI for spotting risks, Legal AI for compliance, and even something called MindCare AI for workforce insight that can all plug into this single shared core. And this is the real takeaway of that whole integrated approach. A standalone tool, it can give you clarity on a specific problem. But an integrated system, where all the tools are sharing signals with each other, that gives you something way more powerful. Foresight. The ability to start seeing what's forming on the horizon, not just cleaning up messes that have already happened. Which kind of leaves us with this final thought to chew on. In the world we live in now, the biggest risks are almost never the obvious ones. They're hidden in the connections, in those second and third degree relationships we just don't see. And that really begs the question, in any decision that truly matters, how can you afford not to see the full picture?